Thank you all for joining us. It's Wednesday, April 22nd, and we are so excited for today's Lunch and Learn. On behalf of Primary Stages and the ESPA family, I welcome you all, whether you're new or have been with us for the past couple of weeks. We so appreciate you being here. Primary Stages is an off-Broadway theater company in New York City, where I am calling you all from. Hello from New York. And ESPA is the Einhorn School of Performing Arts, the school for emerging and established artists that is part of Primary Stages. And on behalf of the entire Primary Stages family, we thank you for spending your lunch hour with us. These calls are successful and so much fun because of you all. So thank you for being here. I'm so excited for today's Lunch and Learn host. Megan Carter is with us today. Megan is an ESPA faculty member. She's a creative producer and dramaturg. She's currently the producing director at City Company and has served as the director of the Stage Directors and Choreographers Workshop Foundation, which is dedicated to training and supporting theater directors and choreographers and advancing the crafts of stage direction and choreography. So yay, the future of the American theater is in wonderful, amazing hands with Megan Carter. She's also worked as Associate Artistic Director of the Women's Project Theater, WP, where she produced and dramaturged 10 world premieres, 6 New York premieres, and 5 developmental production, 3 site-specific shows, and dozens of workshops and readings. So we are so lucky to have Megan to talk about dramaturgy and creative producing and how it relates to some of the things we've been talking about in other playwriting lunch and learns. So how do you work with a dramaturg? The next steps, we've done all these wonderful writing exercises, and we're going to get some more of those today from Megan, but I'm really excited to talk about the collaboration process, kind of the next step after you've written something or as you write something. So welcome, Megan.
Thank you for having me.
We're so excited to have you. I forgot one housekeeping thing. Everybody is muted. If you have any questions, you can chat me, or you can also chat Sarah Matucci. That is also an option in this meeting. But send us your questions and we will ask them live on the air. Hi, Megan.
Hi.
Where are you calling us from? Where are you in the world?
I am in Washington Heights.
Washington Heights. I am in West Harlem, so practically neighbors, very close. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for this conversation today. Oh, wait a second.
So many people.
So many people.
I was like, there are going to be 5 people. And I asked Kelly, and she's like, 40. Okay.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Maybe I should have used a blow dryer today.
No. You look wonderful. I didn't use a blow dryer today. Who needs them?
I haven't used one in weeks.
Yeah, no. You know what? I don't even own one. So we have some questions for you, and I'm just gonna right off the bat ask kind of how would you define dramaturgy? I mean, the definition of dramaturg is sometimes hard to distill into one sentence, because it seems like as a dramaturg for many productions, you do so much. It can change theater maker to theater maker, production to production. So for you, how would you define your role as dramaturg?
So it is really hard to define, and the definition of it tends to change from project to project and collaborator to collaborator. But one of the things I will say is, so I got my MFA in dramaturgy from Brooklyn College, and then I got my job at WP. And at WP, I was the literary manager, the resident dramaturg, the line producer. Sometimes I mopped the floor. It was that kind of job. And that was how I became a producer. So dramaturgy and producing are not disconnected for me. So if I'm working one-on-one with a playwright on a script, not only am I asking them questions, and I think my job as a dramaturg is to ask annoying questions. That's sort of the crux of what it is for me. But asking questions and helping them shape things and thinking about structure and just helping them figure out what the play wants to be. But at the same time, I'm thinking about things like, oh, how would you cast this? What theaters might be interested in this? So the two things are never sort of fully disconnected for me. So people who've taken my playwriting class at ESPA know that sometimes I'll suddenly start talking about production things that they might be thinking about because it will pop into my head. But so in addition to asking annoying questions of everyone, I also think of myself as sort of a synthesizer of information. So like in a process with like a director and a playwright and actors in a rehearsal room, I feel like part of my job is to listen. And then if there's a lot of different information flying around, distilling it and just reflecting it back, sort of as a, hey, this is what I'm hearing. Is this what everybody's saying?
Right on. Bart actually just wrote in a great question. Is there a difference between being a dramaturg for a live playwright and for a play where the playwright has passed? And
yes. So if you're working on a classic text, dead playwright, it becomes about knowing as much as you possibly can about that writer, that play, the context that it was written in, and being the keeper of that information, not because you're necessarily, we don't know what the playwright thought. We don't know what the playwright wanted. What we have is the text that they left us. And I do think that part of the dramaturg's job with that text is to make sure that nobody mucks with it if they're not supposed to. And it varies from playwright to playwright. But I also think it's about, like, if you're doing, I worked on a production of Romeo and Juliet where the director had a very specific take on it. And part of my job was actually to go, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying. Does the text support that? Like, let's go through that. And as a dramaturg, you don't necessarily have that much power in that role. You're just there advising. So a director might still do whatever they want with it, even if you're like, this isn't supported here. Like, I don't know what you're reading, but that's not here. Whereas with a living playwright, it's really about a back and forth. And I like to quote Morgan Jeunesse on this. I can't remember what context she said it in, but I loved it so much. But she was like, as an agent, she was like, I'm not there for the artist, I'm there for the play. I meet the artist in the play. And so for me, it's about really understanding somebody's writing at a cellular level, so that if, for instance, they kind of go off their own track, I'm able to go, okay, but this is what you said you wanted. Has that changed? Like, this is what you said the play was. Has that changed? And then they can go, yeah, actually it has changed, and this is where I'm going now, and then we can pivot. Or they can go, no, you're right. I just completely went off on a tangent, and this isn't what I want to do.
So in both, while they're both different, working with a dead playwright and a living playwright, it's both adhering to the text, or what's in the text, and like what the playwright, if they're living, intends for the text.
Yeah. And because I do believe that the text, and I think this applies to like performative gesture and all of these things too, those are organisms. So at some point, the play actually becomes its own thing, separate from the playwright.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's part of what a playwright is writing towards, is getting it to that place that it can go out into the world without them.
Totally. What led you to dramaturgy?
So I was
producing.
I was an actor, and I'd been an actor for a long time. It's what I'd always wanted to do. And when I left Louisiana, which is where I'm from, rather than moving to New York to be an actor, because that seemed really overwhelming, I moved to Seattle, which at the time had a really thriving theater scene and a good acting pool. But I looked like I was 12. I was like 23 and I looked like I was 12. So the roles that I was auditioning for were terrible. I was also not an ingenue. I was a character actor. I was a character actor who looked like I was 12. And so it was painful and I hated auditioning. And I just kind of looked around and went, this is not the life I want. And this was a while back, but what I realized in retrospect is what was missing for me was agency. And I've made jokes that if I had met City Company when I was still an actor, I would have stayed an actor a little bit longer. But I still think I would have stopped being an actor. So I was going to get out of theater completely. And then I was invited by chance to this development luncheon, like fundraising professionals, and I was seated next to the head of the fundraising department at Intiman Theater, and she was hiring an assistant. And so I was like, okay, I'll do that for a while. So I worked as an assistant in that department and sort of moved up to institutional giving manager. Learned how to raise money, learned how to deal with databases, but really didn't miss acting, but really missed the artistic side. And during all of this, there was a friend of mine from college who had started writing plays, and he always sent me his drafts and I read them and I gave him notes. And he's the first person who called me a dramaturg, but I didn't really know what it meant. And Mame Hunt, who's an extraordinary dramaturg, was on staff at Intiman. And I was like, what is it that you do? And what she said, it was not a useful answer, but what she said, she was like, dramaturg is the ugliest word for the best job in the world. And then I think she returned to reading her script. So I sort of figured, I was like, this seems like a good fit for me. Like there's sort of a nerdy aspect to it with like research and a lot of reading, but it's also very process oriented and being part of the process. And so I decided that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't really know how to go about it. So I left Intiman. I paid my rent by freelance grant writing and database consulting. And then I just started poking around at the smaller theaters in Seattle and being like, hey, do you need a dramaturg? And in some cases they were like, we don't know how to use a dramaturg. I'm like, well, let me in and I will show you. And so I actually did that a lot with Book It Theater in Seattle. And then I interned at ACT in Seattle. And then I decided I needed to go to grad school. So, and I actually was trying to decide, because I'd been directing too. And I was like, am I going to be a dramaturg or am I going to be a director? And because of my weird experience of like fundraising and theater education and just my nerdiness, I went with dramaturgy. So, and then I worked at WP and that was how I became a producer. And so I'm weird.
Not weird at all. I mean, honestly, from a completely selfish point of view, I'm hearing your story and I'm like, maybe I want to be a dramaturg.
It's fun. They don't really pay you for it, but it's fun.
Well, what would you recommend if somebody is, does have a curiosity towards dramaturgy?
Well, I think being in as many rehearsal processes as possible is really important.
Yeah.
And reading everything. Part of the reason that I decided to go to grad school rather than continue on my DIY path was that I was like, I think there's a chunk of my education missing. Like I needed to deep dive into the Greeks and Chekhov and Ibsen and like really, really do that. So that was important for me. But then when I got out of school, I realized the thing that sort of gave me an edge as a dramaturg is that I'd been an actor. And that I knew how to be in a rehearsal room. Whereas a lot of my classmates, they were the kind of dramaturgs who sat in the back of the theater with a pile of books. And I was like, no, that's not me. I have things to say and opinions. But I also knew how to be in a rehearsal room, so I knew how to enter into the conversation.
Totally. All right, cool. Let's see. Thomas sent in a great question, so I'm going to actually hop over to Thomas's question and kind of leave my list for the moment.
Sure.
He was responding to your producer brain and your dramaturgy brain, and his question was, although they're one and the same, they're connected. When you do develop a new work, is your dramaturgy brain ever in conflict with your producer brain? Meaning, like, has your dramaturgy conversations ever led the writer to want something that the production couldn't support?
Yes.
And if so, how have you navigated that?
Usually I just say everything out loud. So recently in one of my classes, it came up with two different playwrights that it was like, I know I need to add more to the play needs to be longer, or the play needs to be shorter, or whatever. And I was like, the play is as long or as short as it is. Like, there's nothing you can do about that. Now, of course, what producer brain says is, well, if you have a play that's 35 minutes long, as a producer, that maybe doesn't stand by itself. In the context of a class, it's much easier to just say, write the play that it is. If I were doing, like, if somebody hired me, like, as a one-on-one dramaturg to develop a piece, which happens, my producer brain is much more likely to say, look, like, you can go in this direction with 27 characters, but, it's going to be really hard to get it produced. If this play has 27 characters and you need 27 actors, you're really writing it for yourself, probably, in the American theater at this moment. But I will support that as a dramaturg.
Right.
But just know that this will be a problem. And usually it is stuff like that. It's usually like cast size. Those are the things that jump out at me. Sometimes it's like set requirements, though I think it's pretty rare that a playwright writes something that's so literal that it couldn't be creatively figured out with a team. But sometimes, if you really have to have a waterfall in the middle of the stage with actual water, I would probably flag that. And as a dramaturg, I would say, is that really what you need? But they definitely conflict. And I would say actually they conflict more when I'm producing something and I have all of the producing parameters already. And then a playwright has like a brilliant idea for a change in the piece that I'm like, yes, yes, okay. But also my producer brain knows we can't afford that.
Right.
So how, and then that's usually a collaborative conversation with director, designer, playwright, like, and I'm a big believer in having everybody in the room talking. The siloing thing is not, I don't love it. It's like, maybe we can actually figure out what that is together to serve the play. And also I have this budget over here that I have to deal with.
Speaking of being in the room, it's a real gift for a playwright to have a dramaturg in the room. So if a playwright is fortunate enough to have a dramaturg on one of their plays in one of their processes, how should they approach that relationship? Do you have any tips for playwrights on working with and best utilizing their time with a dramaturg?
It's a tricky question because what I want to say is trust them, but there are also some really terrible dramaturgs out there. Just as there are terrible directors and there's terrible everybody. So why would you just trust somebody that you just met? But what I would say is actually give the relationship some time to develop, and figure out, as a dramaturg, when I am working with a playwright for the first time, I'm really feeling them out. So I was telling Kelly this story earlier. Some people are so excited when a dramaturg walks into the room. Other people are not. The first time I met Tina Howe and introduced myself as a dramaturg, she literally leapt back 2 feet and shrieked a little bit. Not a fan of dramaturgs, Tina Howe, it turns out. So I have had that response. I've also had directors, particularly older directors, who are like, I don't know what you're for. Why are you here? I can do this job. But I've had other directors who are like, awesome, there's a dramaturg. I can actually let go of that piece of it and let you manage this new play process with the writer while I focus on these other things. Daniela Topol comes to mind as a director who's a fantastic dramaturg in her own right, but works really well with a dramaturg, and really sets up sort of a triangle of the director, dramaturg, and playwright, which is really how that's my favorite way to work, is in that I don't want to stand between the director and the playwright. I don't need to mediate. I mean, I will mediate if I have to, and that has happened sometimes. That's my job, because the communication breaks down between those two people. But my preference is that we're all working together. So I would say, the first thing I think you want to figure out is if the dramaturg actually understands your play, but don't assume that they don't understand it. And try to let the relationship develop a little bit before you decide that this particular dramaturg is not for you.
How would you advise to let the relationship develop? Just conversation?
Yeah.
Amazing.
I think the thing that can happen sometimes, and especially because in the United States we have such short processes, and it's very American to be like, let's just get down to business. You kind of can't do that. You actually can't skip the step where you talk about plays that you love and books that you love and films that you love, and have real conversations about what different pieces of art mean to you, before you get into the thing that you're working on together. You need to create a shared vocabulary, essentially. And it really is just about talking and sharing, and it could be as simple, if you're working on a particular project, it may even be like, hey, I saw these 3 paintings, and they made me think about my own work, and I'm going to share them with you. Or it's really trying to share your brain out. And even though I feel like my job as a dramaturg is to like dig into the playwright's brain, because playwrights so often like have to create by themselves before they open it up. So I feel like it's really my job to like help them open that up, but it's helpful if they want to step through that opening.
Before you get into these conversations, which kind of sounds like to me like dramaturg dating, a little bit, how do you find your playwrights, and how do playwrights find dramaturgs?
So for me, it's always been word of mouth, like for one-on-one kind of outside of a production process. I know a lot of people from my work at WP, and because I ran the lab there, that's where a lot of my connections are. And the artists who came through the WP lab are everywhere. So there's that. I've had agents recommend me to playwrights. I recently started a relationship. We're not officially working together, we're dating. But he's an older playwright. He'd never worked with a dramaturg before. He went to some talk or something and talking about dramaturgs, and was talking to a friend of his who happens to be a really good friend of mine. And she was like, well, if you want to explore working with a dramaturg, you should meet Megan. And so we met for coffee and just talked about all of the things. And then I was like, look, why don't you send me 3 plays that you think are representative of what you do? And I'm going to read those, and then we're going to talk about those plays. and you can decide if I get you based on that. So, but you know, and I've had people through ESPA actually who've reached out to me about particular projects, and a lot of times I'm brought into a room as a dramaturg as opposed to a one-on-one with a playwright by a director.
Right on. I'm sorry, my brain.
Zoom
How Zoom fatigue? It's happening. I know that you've done a lot of work also as a dramaturg on ensemble devised pieces, which is a very unique experience. What does the process of dramaturging a devised ensemble-based piece look like? And how is that different than the one-on-one playwright dramaturg?
I love it. It's super messy. So the two ensembles that I've worked with sort of most deeply are City Company and the Rude Mechs. And they're very, very different. So City Company is already they're very research oriented in their process. Like Anne Bogart comes into a new piece with a set of questions that she wants everybody to explore, and a bunch of, like, she's been researching. Table work involves assignments for people like go away, different company members go away. And so as a dramaturg, part of what you're doing is collecting. It's the synthesizing thing again, where you're like collecting all of the ideas and then reflecting them back out. The first show that I worked on with City Company was actually commissioned by WP, and it was not devised, but it was also not really a real play. It was Virginia Woolf's only play, which she did not write for public consumption. She wrote for her family. There were two versions of it. Part of my job was working with Anne and the company to meld those two versions. And then I annotated the script because it had so many allusions, like literary allusions and all of this stuff from Victoriana. And so I did that. So when I came into first rehearsal, I had a binder that was like that size. And they loved, like, that's a group of people who loves that. They're like, we want to read all of the stuff. Like, I had done research on all of the characters and blah, 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 blah. And then it was really just sort of off they go and you respond. With the Rude Mechs, I worked with them on a piece that was basically like already all put together. They'd been working on it for a long time. And they hired me to be a dramaturgical ninja, which was, they did not send me the script in advance. I knew almost nothing about the piece. I flew to North Carolina, which is where they were workshopping it. I dropped into rehearsal. I watched what they were doing. I asked them a ton of questions, and then I went away. And then they sent me the script as things changed. And there was an audience interactive piece to it, and that was part of what they were trying to figure out. It was like a puzzle. And so actually the fact that I knew nothing about it was what they needed. So
interesting.
I just kind of parachuted in. And I'm really good at that. Like, I'm really good at being the person who's like, I have no idea what's going on. Let me reflect back to you what I'm seeing. So that was super fun. But yeah, it's really different. But a lot of it with devising processes, it's really about collation and editing and, you know, letting people make something and then responding to it, or like going, oh, that's another thread that we have to go look for. Like, I actually need to go find a piece of text for that. Sometimes it's also being the person in the room, if there's not a playwright, to be like, y'all need a playwright. Like, you've gotten as far as you can without one, you know. And
now it's time for a playwright. Yeah,
and it varies. There's some things that are, you know, City's very actor driven. Right. Most of the scripts for their devised work, which were truly devised with no playwright, if you read them on the page, they're not good plays. what makes them is all of the elements together. So it's an interesting kind of thing. They're doing something else, the different kind of process. So then as a dramaturg, a lot of what you're looking at is the big picture, and is this actually all hanging together? And being a set of outside eyes, which for me often means in the process that I go away for a long time and then I come back, because the director's there all the time. And at some point the director's eyes get tired. So having somebody who's able to come in and be like, yeah, this is only working in your head. It's not actually coming out here.
I love the idea of the dramaturg ninja, the ninja dramaturg. What piece was that?
Now, oh now.
Now, oh now. So Jade, no, it was not Stop Hitting Yourself. It was Now, oh now.
No, it was Now, oh now, which I don't think has been to New York. It was at Yale. They did it in New Orleans, and then they did it at Yale, but I'm not sure it's actually had it's a great show, but yeah.
Well, keep an eye out for it, folks. Talking about your work with City Company, I know that you are working with them right now. Can you just like tell everybody about the company, the mission, the philosophy, and like how you all are navigating
yeah.
right now, this moment?
Yeah. So City Company, this is an ensemble of mostly actors, but also designers and a director who came together 30 years ago. And the company as it stands right now, most of those people have been in the company for most of the 30 years, which is insane. Like, it doesn't happen. So in terms of mission, it's interesting because I just started, I've been working with City for like 10 years, but I just started on staff last summer. And I'm like, where is our mission statement? Do we have a mission statement? And I still haven't really found one. But it is
asking those questions always.
Yeah. But it's an artist-driven company, and it centers the performer. And the City philosophy is create, teach, learn. So those are the three sort of cornerstones of what they do. So making work, teaching the training that they do, and the way they make work is built on the foundation of the training. And the training is Suzuki, which comes from Tadashi Suzuki, director in Japan, and the viewpoints, which were created by Mary Overly, a choreographer, and then developed and expanded out by Anne Bogart and Tina Landau and City Company. Like, they're members of the company who, over the years of training people in the viewpoints, have really like continued to expand what it means. And the way Anne talks about the two trainings is Suzuki is vertical and viewpoints is horizontal. So Suzuki is very, very structured. Viewpoints is improvisational. So they're very, very different. But what's interesting to me is the way City puts them together. And what it essentially does is it creates, for an ensemble, even a brand new ensemble, it creates a vocabulary very quickly. So they train together, they rehearse. And most of the piece, especially the early stuff that they worked on, was just about inquiry. Like, Anne would come in with a set of questions, and then they would sort of make things from there. And the dynamics of the company are interesting because Anne's really a starter. She's like a first brushstroke on the canvas kind of girl. And then the company members, the actors, really they deal with making the stuff in the middle. So they take sort of Anne's big idea and then they wrestle with it. And then there are a couple folks in the company who are the finishers. And they're the ones who actually like take it to the finish line. So it's it is a messy process, but they also work really quickly because they have this shorthand with viewpoint, and so their early work was mostly devised. They've also done a lot of Chuck Mee's work, and I would argue they are the best interpreters of Chuck's work. And lately they've been doing the Greeks a lot. But right now, in this very weird moment we're in, because their work is so much about the body, when all of this hit, the company was in Minnesota doing the Bacchae at the Guthrie. We had to close the show a week after it opened because of the virus. I had to scramble to get everybody home. We're supposed to be in Singapore right now doing Three Sisters in a collaboration with another theater company, 9 Years Theater. That's postponed until next year. And then of course we have training, and we have our summer intensive at Skidmore, which has now been canceled. What's been interesting with the company is I feel like there's been almost a little bit of a war about what to do with theater at this moment in time. I don't actually think anybody's wrong. I'm sort of annoyed by the argument. So there are people, I think, who have jumped online and started making stuff online. I have no general opinion about that. What City Company has done, and which is so City Company, and I actually really appreciate it, is they're like, we got to think about this. Like, people keep asking us about training, and they're like, we're not ready to talk about training online. We're not ready to put anything out online. Let's think about this. And so we've been having these company meetings, and we talk and we check in with each other. These people have known each other for 30 years. They've been through a lot of crises together. So it's kind of an amazing group of people to be in the midst of in this moment. So they've turned their focus to a book that they've been talking about for a long time, but they haven't had time to do. So we're working on the book. They all have their first deadline to submit things to me on May 1st. I think it's gonna be super cool. And we are about to launch some online events, which I think we're calling campfire stories or city socials or something like that. They're going to be very intimate events, but we're going to do a bunch of them in a short period of time. And we're going to do them at weird times of day so we can really lock into the international community, because those are our people. So like we have some at 7 in the morning so that we can capture Asia. But it's really going to be just like 2 City Company members telling stories, like the tour of Bob in Tbilisi, or like this other thing that they did. And they're good storytellers, and the stories are amazing. So it's that, like, that's sort of our first foray into the online world. We are talking about some classes that we might do online. We're talking about a playwriting for ensembles class that we think we can do online. And then we actually have a couple of things that I think, like performance things, that we're going to release probably by June. I'm not going to say more about them because they're still, like, City likes to mull things.
Yeah.
Come out. So
ask all those questions.
So they're really, they're really thinking about what this moment is and what they have to contribute and who this company is in the world. And yeah.
Well, I cannot wait to see everything that comes out, and I'm so excited for this book.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't tell you how many times I've read And Then You Act by Anne Bogart.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really cool. It's also going to have lots of photos.
Yay, 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 yay. Well, I have one more question from Nicole, and then shall we dive into the writing prompts? Great. So Nicole's question for you is, what advice would you give to a playwright who is trying to figure out if their play is finished or needs more work?
I think some of that has to do with knowing yourself. I think some people are able to let things go, and other people will toy with them forever. So in some respects, I'm not sure a play is ever done. But I just last night in my playwriting class, one of my students brought in a play that they've been working on for a long time, and it's really good. And and she brought this section in, and I was like, here's my radical note for you. Stop tinkering with this play. Like, stop. You can't tinker with it again until you get in a room with a director and playwrights. So I don't know. I actually don't know how you know, because I think it's very, very personal. And I've definitely had situations as a producer where somebody's submitted a play to me and I've had a conversation with them about it, and I've said, I don't think it's finished. And their response is, but it is. I'm like, great, I'm not the producer for it. So it's a weird balance, I think, in knowing your own process, and not overthinking it. And then also being able to hear other people's feedback. You know, if you have 12 people read, if you think it's finished and you have 12 people read it and they're like, something's missing, something might be missing. But the thing that might be missing might be actors too. So again, don't tinker it to death. If you think you're finished, walk away from it. You can come back to it.
Nicole, I think that answers your question very well. So we have some playwriting prompts here. Megan, which image should I share first?
So let me give these some context.
Yeah.
So because I am a dramaturg, and the way I run my playwriting classes is really like playwriting group, I tend to only do prompts when I feel like somebody needs a specific prompt. So these may not be useful at all, but I created 3 prompts. 2 of them are just visual. And Kelly, the title of the paintings is actually in the name of it. And then the other prompt is like probably way more detailed than is necessary, but maybe it will inspire somebody. It is a recipe for a radio play. And it also includes an image, should anyone want an image with that, but it has 5 ingredients to put into the play. And then a quote, which is a last line from a book.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
You will.
Huzzah. Well, then I'm going to share those images with everyone. Does anyone have any last minute questions before we bid Megan adieu? Unless, are you going to talk us through the images, or are these just for folks to go off and write?
They're just for, I think they're
Amazing.
really rich images. So
they are.
I think you can just go off the images. The Great. Radio, I will be so curious if anybody uses the radio play prompt. So tell me if that gets used.
Oh, it will get used. And everything's about to get shared with everyone shortly. So thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
This has been so lovely. And I think we all learned so much about dramaturgy today.
Good. Take care.
Thank you, Megan. Great. So, friends, this is how we're gonna do this. I'm going to share one of the images for you all to look at and ask yourself some questions about the image. I'll also prompt you as we go along, and we'll take 10 minutes to let's take 15. Let's take 15 to look at it and respond to it in however you see fit, whether it's a monologue, whether it's a scene. And then we'll go into breakout rooms, and then I'll send the radio play as the takeaway from today's. So then if you write the radio play, send it my way, and then I can share it with Megan, which I think she'd really love, we'd really love. I think it's a great idea. So I am going to share my screen, and the image I'm sharing is Bird Bath, Leonora Carrington. I'm gonna share my screen. Great, amazing. I'm gonna put myself on mute, take like 15 minutes to take a look, and I'll prompt you with some questions as we go along, but I'm just gonna quiet myself and let you take the image in. I have 10 more minutes. Some questions for you all. Who are these people? What are they doing? What's their job? Are they doing their job? Are they not doing their job? What's happening on the other side of that house or inside that house? What's beyond the frame of this painting, of this canvas? Off screen, what's off screen, if you will? Where are they, both physically and in time? Is this now? Is it in the past? Is it in the future? About 5 more minutes. And another question is, who's the person in the background? About 2 more minutes, but you don't have to be done. About 30 more seconds. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Thank you all for joining us today for our Lunch and Learn. Don't forget to join Primary Plus, our Facebook group. We'd love to see you on that, and follow us on Instagram at Primary Stages and also at Espagrams. And we're on Twitter. Thank you for being with us. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.